Hello, and welcome to the first of potentially multiple installments of me explaining my choice of submission for a kill in Dead Little Roosters. This particular video will be about my guess for episode 4, the kill corresponding with stanza 4. At the time that I'm recording this, we won't know the correct answer for another 2 days when the episode releases. Take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt, because even though I'm very confident in my guess, I could very well be wrong. I'm going to break down my answer by explaining how you could have reached the same answer using 2 different strategies. The first is the quote-unquote in-episode strategy that examines clues buried within the actual episodes of Dead Little Roosters, and the second, more meta strategy of trying to guess future stanzas and closely examining Josh's tweets and sleuthing guides on the DLR website. I'll also break down all red herrings for this kill and how I identified them, specifically those that are incarnate in the case of stanza 4. Without further ado, my prediction for episode 4. Iffy by the Ruby Crescent Rose Scythe. How did I reach this answer? First, let's examine clues that I found in episodes 1 through 3 that support my choices for victim and weapon. Or, if you're in a rush, here's a TLDR collage. I'll start by explaining my choice of weapon, the Crescent Rose Scythe, because this half of my answer is by far the more obvious, not to mention popular, choice. Lines 2 through 4 of the stanza support this selection. Line 4. Reaped what was sown. This line is without a doubt the easiest one to associate with the scythe, seeing as a scythe in the normal non-Ruby universe is used in farming to reap/harvest crops. It quite literally reaps what you sow. Line 2. Weapon flown. I think it's very important to consider why the word flown is used in this line and not the word thrown. Obviously both work with the rhyme, so that's not the reason. This leads me to believe that the weapon isn't simply thrown at the victim. I was able to come up with 3 decent interpretations of this line. Number 1 is that one of the weapons on our lovely little list is the Golden Deagle, a weapon from Trouble in Terrorist Town. The deagle is named after the desert eagle, something that literally flies. However, Josh confirmed on Twitter that the deagle is not the correct weapon, seeing as it hasn't been seen in the mansion or referenced by the end of episode 3. Still sad about that. It also isn't as strong to me as the other 2 interpretations for flown. The next being that Ruby Rose uses the scythe's recoil to propel herself into the air in Ruby, an action that could sort of be referred to as flying. Using this interpretation, weapon flown more closely means weapon piloted. However, it's hard to imagine that anyone in Dead Little Roosters, given that they're trapped in their rooms, is going to attempt to fly on the scythe. Although I would be quite amused if I'm proven wrong and Iffy launches himself out the window. The third interpretation, and by far the strongest one, requires you to know that fly is a synonym of flee. Knowing this, you can interpret weapon flown as weapon has flown or weapon has fled, meaning the weapon is missing from its original location. In episode 2, we see the scythe on the wall outside of Fiona's room. However, in episode 3, it's missing from that same spot, likely meaning it was taken by the killer. This, in turn, means that the scythe fits with weapon flown. Line 3. The fourth filleted. I personally think the word filleted was used here mostly to lead you towards a red herring that I'll get into a bit later, not to mention the alliteration. That being said, it also works very nicely with the scythe. To fillet means to cut into pieces or remove the bones from a cut of meat. Since we're dealing with full-grown humans, specifically a thicked-up dude, and not tiny cuts of meat, you'd need a pretty massive blade to cut a victim into separate pieces. The scythe is one of very few weapons on the list that fits this requirement size-wise. Thus, it works with the term filleted. Now, the more controversial half of my answer. Iffy as our victim. Lines 1 and 4 of the stanza support the idea of Iffy being killed this week. Line 1 reads, "Taste of trouble." This was a line that Josh emphasized on Twitter. 2 major interpretations surfaced in the DLR community. One synonym of in trouble is in a jam, potentially connecting Eric to this line due to his involvement with Face Jam, which is mentioned explicitly in episode 2. You can also take trouble to mean in a pickle, which most likely connects to Iffy since he was very enthusiastically consuming a full platter of pickles in episode 2 as well. I found pickle to be the stronger translation when you factor in the rest of the line. If we say that trouble means jam, then the line still reads as taste of jam. You can't really translate taste to face to make this face jam, so this line ends up sounding a bit weak. However, if you sub in pickle for trouble, it reads taste of pickle, which can be left alone and simply mean that the victim has eaten a pickle. Josh has posted translations for the previous 2 stanzas following the kill reveal, so being able to create a decent translation for each line that accounts for every word is very important. Line 4, as mentioned earlier, is reaped what was sown. This one can be connected to Iffy using a line spoken by Trevor about Iffy in episode 3. Right before we see Iffy scrolling through the Rooster Teeth dating app, Trevor's narration says that Iffy is plotting love. Plotting is a close synonym to planting and can very easily be connected to agriculture, just like line 4. We're then left to work that into the full line. The thing that Iffy sowed was love, so according to the stanza, he's going to reap love. It's a bit confusing to think of how this could actually kill him, and perhaps you'd be tempted at this point to select marriage as the weapon if we hadn't confirmed the scythe using the rest of the stanza. The stanza requires you to see the scythe as a symbol of love. There goes that symbol again, ooh boy. There are 2 very important ways to make this connection. The first being that the scythe is shown to us in episode 2, its very first appearance, through Fiona's keyhole, which happens to be shaped like a heart. Placing the scythe inside of a heart, with a red background color no less, is supposed to form the connection between the scythe and love in our minds. This is part of why I ended up picking the scythe as the weapon for episode 3, thinking it would be symbolic of Michael and Lindsay's relationship, so color me upset about that. We can also make this connection to love by considering the name of the scythe, Crescent Rose. Roses are known to be the flower of love. Furthermore, a rose, being a flower, is a plant. Thus, it can be reaped. Putting the whole stanza together with this interpretation, you get something like this. Ate some pickles, the weapon disappeared. He's gonna get cut up by the rose that he plotted. Something like that, but more elegant. As Josh said, this stanza isn't as all connected as the others, and so each line feels pretty independent from the rest. In short, the clues you need to solve this kill are A. Iffy eating pickles in episode 2, B. The scythe being seen through the heart keyhole in episode 2, C. The scythe being missing from that wall in episode 3, and D. Trevor saying that Iffy is plotting love. It's very likely that I've missed some more subtle or substantial clues, but those 4 are the most crucial to solving this riddle. Now, the more meta explanation for this answer. Josh reveals in a sleuthing guide on the website that this particular kill isn't rooted in any RT lore, unlike the previous 2 kills, which were inspired by Red vs. Blue Zero and Camp Camp. Josh also said that the why as to why he had to have this kill be disconnected from outside lore is in and of itself a clue. In hindsight, this was a painfully direct hint as to who our victim would be for this stanza. Josh had to have this particular kill not have any connection to outside lore because the victim doesn't have enough outside lore to use. Seeing as Iffy is a part-time employee of only a few months and isn't known for any RT content outside of his work with Achievement Hunter and his show with Fiona, Iffy is the only player that fits the bill. This is why Josh used the pickle scene as a clue to the victim in the stanza. He had to use a scene from within Dead Little Roosters itself. Plus, if Iffy somehow wasn't the correct answer for this kill, the pickle scene and the dating app scene would have no real value from a mystery standpoint. They'd solely be for comedy's sake. Josh has also been pushing us to look at future stanzas and consider their solutions in order to make stronger, educated guesses for earlier stanzas. This logic was supposed to help you determine the scythe to be a red herring for stanza 3, since it needed to be in play for stanza 4. Josh himself hinted at this at the end of his episode 3 death explanation, saying that you could have eliminated the scythe using season-long strategy. Josh is known to tweet several hints every week leading up to a new episode to help steer you towards the right answer, or unintentionally confuse you into picking the wrong answer because you're overthinking. Shortly after the submission form for stanza 4 opened on Friday, Josh tweeted "Taste of Trouble," with trouble being in all caps. Many people took this to be a reference to trouble in Terrorist Town, prompting Josh to reveal that the deagle isn't a possible answer this week. As I mentioned before, trouble can be taken as jam or pickle.
Jam implying Eric and pickle implying Iffy. Josh also made sure to mention that the word taste is important. In my opinion, the word taste already creates a strong connection to Face Jam, given that it's said explicitly in Dead Little Roosters that Face Jam is a fast food podcast. If we were only given the word taste in the stanza, you might think of Iffy as a possible victim because of his iconic love of pickles, but you'd definitely decide that Eric is the stronger pick due to the abundance of Face Jam references present in the show thus far. This is why I believe Josh chose to emphasize trouble rather than taste. If we were just given trouble and no taste of, pickle is a closer synonym than jam, making Iffy the stronger candidate. And once again, when you translate the entire line, it's easier to create a clean translation with pickle rather than one with jam to connect to Face Jam.
Josh also tweeted about trying to figure out how to give hints for this week's kill without spoiling future stanzas, implying that looking at future stanzas is critical to reaching the right answer this week. Eric, in my opinion, is a very strong candidate for stanza 7. This makes it odd for him to die this early. I gotta say, as much as all of that feels really solid in and of itself, the nail in the coffin for me was Josh's tweet about watching out for red herrings, especially incarnate ones. Incarnate essentially means in the flesh or in human/corporeal form. Josh was telling us to watch out for a human red herring. While you could just take this as Josh saying to watch out for a victim red herring this week, I believe that he's actually calling Eric a legitimate human version of a red herring, as in the actual fish, a red herring. Consider the following. Eric is dressed entirely in red. Fun fact, the opposite of red is green. This is really just me trying to find some extra tiny clues for Iffy, so carry on. Eric says in episode 1 that he's planning on getting jacked to the gills. Not only is this a very direct copy of the definition of filleting, but it equates Eric himself to a fish. Eric also has some nautical decorations in his room, including a legit fish vase seen in the tutorial video. These are the clues that make him a human red herring. However, there are a ton more that add to this idea of him being over-the-top levels of obvious for this kill. Trevor says in episode 2 that Eric is about to face the consequences of his own inaction right before his call with Jordan. This is another painfully direct parallel to a line from the stanza, that line being reaped what was sown. Eric has some plain theme decorations as well as nautical ones, potentially intended to connect him to the line weapon flown. Eric is also Judas in the Last Supper painting. Some took this as a clue towards him being the killer. I, however, see it as an extra red herring for this kill. Judas is the only apostle to commit suicide. Reaped what was sown heavily implies, at the very least, a responsibility for your own death, even if it was unintentional, which is the closest to suicide I imagine any of these kills will get. This could also be a clue for his eventual death later, so I'm not writing it out just yet. This one's a bit weak, but Eric is shown to be pretty spineless at this point in the show. You could in theory equate this to a cut of meat being filleted and thus not having any bones, but there's certainly stronger pieces of evidence at play. There you have it. Based on the Discord discussions that took place during the week leading up to episode 4 and the results of the prediction poll, Eric by Scythe was the most popular answer, with Iffy being the second most popular victim choice and the Quartermaster's Hook being the second most popular choice of weapon, once Deagle Theory was tragically shut down. If somehow Eric is, in fact, the correct answer this week, I will be forced to eat my own foot. Don't really want to do that, and I would just find that solution kind of disappointing in comparison to my own. Thank you for watching and enduring my lengthy rambles about this stanza. If you aren't already a part of the Dead Little Roosters Discord server or subreddit, I am the admin of both, and the discussion that's been happening in both of them has been immensely helpful for me and a ton of fun. Also, we have custom emojis for all of the weapons. Lil Tooth is peacing out. Good luck to us all.
Except that one dude with a perfect score. I mean, they're already a god and they don't need it. Well, I say that, but I'm pretty sure I had a perfect score too. Then a platypus ruined my life.
Whack.